BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, and thanks for joining us for the Farming Today podcast. In this edition, we are flexing those biceps Popeye style and hearing about the secrets of farming spinach. And are council taxpayers in the countryside set to lose out in government funding reforms?
The government is largely redistributing the existing pot of money that exists for local government rather than putting in their own new money from central funds.
We'll have more on that shortly. First, though, the Vivergo bioethanol plant on the Humber near Hull has now stopped production and started laying off staff after the government confirmed last week that it wouldn't provide support for the industry. The future of the business had been in doubt since tariffs were removed on bioethanol imports from the US in the recent trade agreement with Donald Trump. The company, owned by Associated British Foods, bought in locally grown wheat, around 1 million tonnes a year, and distilled it into bioethanol, which is added to petrol to reduce emissions, and also produced large quantities of cattle feed as a byproduct. It's one of just 2 plants in the UK. Well, it's bad news for the farmers who've supplied the company, and some critics of the government's decision not to support bioethanol production say it should be playing a vital role in the UK's transition to clean energy. But Dr. Michael Short from the School of Chemistry and Chemical Engineering at the University of Surrey says the UK has, in fact, been dependent on American bioethanol for some time now.
Most of the bioethanol used in the UK is from the US. And the reason really is because the US has a very, very established bioethanol market there. They've been doing intensive agriculture of corn for many, many years at very large scale. They also have very large scale bioethanol plants and low energy prices and a lot of supportive subsidies. And so that makes their ethanol very competitive. The UK is a small place, smaller land availability, and also we have very high energy prices. Competition already was quite tight for these companies to be able to be competitive against the US and Brazil as well.
When it comes to whether the government should have supported Vivergo, though, I mean, they say that they've taken the difficult decision not to offer direct funding because it wouldn't provide value for the taxpayer or solve the long-term problems that the industry faces. What do you make of that?
It is a tough one just because of the fact that the bioethanol coming in is quite a bit cheaper than the bioethanol that we're producing here. However, if the government were to put in some other mechanisms that are maybe more around carbon emissions rather than purely around subsidy rates and costs, this could help. So, for example, the bioethanol coming in from the States does have a higher carbon footprint than the bioethanol that we're creating in the UK. In terms of energy security, absolutely having your own supply of this stuff does add to resilience. The UK government could have been looking at things like building reserves of bioethanol fuels, which they currently don't do as far as I'm aware. And, you know, these sorts of mechanisms could have helped sustain the industry without necessarily direct funding.
And how important is it going to be in the future as a fuel?
Ethanol is vital for sustainable aviation fuels, so SAF. You don't directly put ethanol into aviation fuels, but you can upgrade ethanol to kerosene, which you can put into aviation fuel to create very clean aviation fuel.
And of course, the bioethanol industry also produces, as a byproduct, carbon dioxide, doesn't it? And we do need carbon dioxide as a country.
Absolutely. And it also produces feed for animals. One of the byproducts is a feed for animals. The Vivergo plant didn't do CO2, I believe, as a product. They were planning on putting in CO2 capture for the fermentation process, but the other plant does have CO2 as a product stream still. So that may be a lifeline, partially because other large heavy industries that used to supply CO2 to the UK have gone offline in the last 5 years.
You know, we do see a lot of on-farm energy production through the use of anaerobic digesters. How come they've been successful, whereas bioethanol production hasn't been?
AD is supported by a totally different subsidy scheme called the Green Gas Support Scheme more recently. And this scheme encourages 50% waste to be fed into the digesters. Because the subsidy is quite substantial, it really does support companies to be able to operate without competing directly with natural gas.
And could you have produced bioethanol by using waste?
There are ways to create bioethanol from waste. However, the issues with this is that because it's a monoculture, so when you're doing fermentation, you're only working with one microbe at a time, basically. And these microbes can be quite sensitive to the various things that come in with waste. So, for example, if you have food waste, you've got a big variety of feedstocks that have very different properties. And because you've got hundreds of species of microbes in the anaerobic digesters, they're quite resilient to different feedstocks. The problem with ethanol is because you've only got a limited number of species that can do this fermentation process, you are more limited with how much variation they're able to take. And so the waste to bioethanol routes, they do exist, but they are quite a bit more expensive and haven't been really proven at a commercial scale yet.
That's Dr. Michael Short from the University of Surrey. Now, what are your feelings on spinach? It was once just seen as the preserve of Popeye and was pretty well guaranteed to get a thumbs down from kids at the dinner table, but it's undergone something of a reinvention. All this week, we're looking at salad crops, and baby leaf spinach has become a staple in pre-packed salads and our salad bowls. It's a high-value cash crop, and Adam Lockwood at Little Leaf Salads grows it on 130 acres near Evesham. Howard Shannon has been to see how this year's crop has been faring in the heat.
Today has been, I think it's going to be recorded as one of the hottest days of the year. 31.2 degrees Celsius, my thermometer said as I was arriving. So let's have a look at your spinach. Are you happy with it?
Absolutely. You can see we've just recently irrigated this again, so it's had much more water than we'd like it to have had, but it's looking very well for it. Great colour. You can tell normally if we hadn't irrigated this crop, that would be on the floor wilting and sad. But at the moment it's upright and looking pretty happy and still growing, which is great. It's just coming up to harvest. It's due to be harvested over the next couple of days. It's been in the ground here for about 30 days now, which is our kind of peak season growth cycle.
What's the productivity of this field and how many crops of spinach or lettuce or whatever you can get out of it? How many do you get in a year?
So this is based on 2 crops a year here. So they're very short growth cycles. They're about 30 days. So we're able to farm the fields twice and get 2 crops and then put it into a winter production of a cereal crop for the next season.
And in terms of the spinach, do you rotate with other salad crops as well?
We always rotate. So our business model is based on renting land within other farmers' rotation across a wide area to spread risk. Primarily baby spinach. We're also trialling and doing some wild rocket crops, all baby leaf for the bag salad market. We actually started our base up in Hinckley in Leicestershire. So rented 50 acres from a farmer there within his rotation. And then that's grown what it is today across kind of 3 sites.
It's been a tough year though, hasn't it? It's been very dry, it's been very hot. How's that been for you? Has it been a challenge?
We're on the back of a very difficult couple of years for the opposite reason. So 2 very wet years. Last year, a very difficult year for us. At the beginning of this season, I said I wouldn't mind if it never rained again, and that's exactly what happened. I wish I never said it, I'll be honest. Particularly on these kind of soils where you're on light sand and gravel soils that just struggle when they don't have the moisture. It's put a lot of stress on our resources here for irrigation. Yeah.
So aside from the water problem, what are the bigger issues are you facing?
Labour is a big issue for us, you know. We're fairly mechanised as a business in terms of all baby leaf crops are typically cut with a machine. So we have a small team. We only have 7 or 8 people with us through our peak season. But other farmers that are growing whole head crops that are still hand harvested, it's a massive issue getting the number of people and the quality of people.
And in terms of when's a good time to harvest, what time of day, for instance, would you harvest your spinach crop here?
So that's been another challenge this year with the heat and the dry. It's been a lot of early starts. We're out early in the mornings, 3:30 in the morning, just to make sure we've got that freshness. Because a bit of sun, a bit of wind, it's soon limp and on the floor, and you're not able to cut it, and your quality's not there. So we cut it, and then it's straight into cold storage. Then it's delivered to our packer, who would vacuum cool it and take the temperature out straight away, get it down to storage temperature of about 3 degrees. Then they'd keep it in their fridge and wash it and bag it before it goes onto a supermarket shelf.
And is this crop spot market? You get what you get for it on the day, or are you hedging your bets? Have you already sold this crop a year in advance?
So everything we do is, we call it programme pricing, so it's fixed price for the season. So I could tell you what we're going to sell every week of the year from April till the end of October. So we agree the price, we negotiate that in the winter time, find the ground and water to grow it, and then we produce to that programme. So everything we do is fixed.
Adam Lockwood and his spinach near Evesham in the West Midlands. The government is to bring in major changes to the way that council and local authority funding is calculated, which will mean, they say, new fairer funding and more stability, which will help deliver better public services while improving the lives of people across the country. Unless, that is, you are a council taxpayer in one of England's county or rural councils. That's what the County Councils Network reckons, and it's told the government so in its response to a consultation on the proposed changes. It argues that rural council taxpayers will shoulder the burden of redistributing hundreds of millions of pounds to urban areas, meaning some councils will face deep cuts to their services. Tim Oliver is the chairman of the County Councils Network.
Fair funding is an attempt to equalise funding around the country so that all councils have whatever they need to deliver their services. And there are sort of two key parts to the proposals. The first is that the government have looked at the formulas that they use for the distribution of money, for example, for adult social care and for children's services and for highways maintenance. And then the second aspect is so-called council tax equalisation. What they have done is to put a notional value on a Band D council tax, and anything in excess of that, broadly speaking, goes back to government. It's quite a complicated process, but that will have a significant impact on long-term funding for councils.
Can you explain what that impact would be?
So, broadly speaking, 22 unitary and county councils will see a small increase in grant funding, and 16 councils across the country, the South, Midlands and the North, will lose funding. And the only way in which that can be made up is by putting up council tax by the maximum 5% every single year for at least the next 3 years, which is the period of the spending review. The resident will be funding these so-called fair funding reforms, and those that are losing out won't necessarily be able to make up the difference even by putting up council tax by 5%. So that's going to put real pressure on those services and probably will result in cuts in services.
But you say that 22 councils have actually had an increase in funding.
Well, it's a small increase in funding, but it is dependent upon all of those councils putting up their council tax pretty much to the full level. I mean, part of the problem here is that the government is largely redistributing the existing pot of money that exists for local government rather than putting in their own new money from central funds. There's a massive reliance upon councils increasing local council tax.
So how much worse off are rural councils going to be than urban areas?
Yeah, so if you take my own council, I'm the leader of Surrey County Council, we estimate that we will lose 160 million of funding over 3 years. So our budget at the moment is 1.2 billion a year, but 160 million, we don't have that sort of money to make up from reserves, or we can't generate that level of income. We're probably the worst off of all county councils, but there are many others that will be seeing tens of millions of lost income.
But I mean, the government would point out that there's a new remoteness indicator that it's bringing in, and also a new formula for distributing funding for both social care and school transport, which really will work to the advantage of rural areas.
Yes, it does. And that's a real positive in that there is a recognition of the increased cost of delivery of services in rural areas. And if actually the government had simply stopped at that point and just revised those formulas, then I think a lot of rural counties wouldn't have been that unhappy. But it's the second aspect of these reforms that is the problem, this council tax equalisation, where anything over and above a certain level effectively goes back to the government for redistribution to other parts of the country. That is what is causing a real concern to rural county areas.
Tim Oliver from the County Councils Network. Well, the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government told us, we do not recognise this analysis. It goes on, the current outdated way in which local authorities are funded means the link between funding and need for services has broken down. Some places have been left behind, with communities facing declining neighbourhood services. This is not fair. And that's all from us for today. I'm Kaz Graham. The producer is Rebecca Rooney, and Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.